Good morning. How's it going? Hey, Faith. Hey, GD. Morning. Good morning. Hope everybody's doing well. You want to go ahead and get your course arc and your notebook open. We're going to jump in. We'll review a little bit from Monday since I was out and make sure we're good. And then we're going to work more on we'll get the whole course arc done and we'll work on more of the notebook today. So, good morning. Is that Kenny? Your tile from South Park? Is that Kenny? Yes, I miss Kenny on the newer stuff. Yes, I love Kenny. I'm a big South Park fan. Good morning. Sometimes I don't notice some of the tiles because when you guys come in, when there's only a few people in the meet, then the tiles are big, but the more people that join, then the tiles get really tiny. So sometimes it's hard they just kind of start looking like a little bit of a blob. You know what I mean? So good morning, everyone. Go ahead and get the course arc open, module 8, lesson 2 course arc open, and the notebook open. Okay, we're going to review a little bit and then continue working on the notebook. We'll get 5 and 6 done, and we'll finish the course arc today. So we'll be able to get quite a bit done so that you don't have the course arc to do and just a little bit of the notebook to finish before you have your quiz. So good morning. Hope everybody's having a good day. Did anybody get snow at their house on Monday? I got like 3 inches. Like I'm up like kind of in the hills, and I still have snow in my backyard. Did anybody else get snow on Monday? Yes, nice. Nice. You didn't see any? Yeah, I know like certain parts of town like got none, and then other parts just got like dumped on. And it's funny because like I'm up against the hill, the mountain, and so I got a ton of snow. Like I said, 3-4 inches, like quite a bit for us. But then you literally like drive down the hill at the bottom of the hill, and there was like a dusting, like barely any. So it was amazing, like how just within like a half mile, the difference in snowfall that happened Monday. So. All right, I'm going to get started here in just a second. So if you're just joining, please welcome. Go ahead and get module 8, lesson 2, the course arc open that you started Monday, and the notebook, okay? So the course arc and notebook open. We'll review a little bit. I was reported to me the video was maybe a little bit fast. I got really sick this weekend, and so I could barely talk on Sunday. Like I completely lost my voice and stuff. So my friend was also going to be out. She teaches government, so I used her video. But I know every teacher does things a little bit differently. So I'll just review to make sure that we're good a little bit before we move on to new stuff. So get your course arc and notebook open. I need to go check my dog real quick, and then we're going to get started. Okay. All right, let's get started. Hope everybody's having a great day. And stuff. So get your course arc notebook open. We're going to jump into that here in just a second. I just have 1 or 2 intro slides. And like I said, we'll review really briefly Monday in case you missed some of the information and stuff. So I'll help you out with that. And then we're going to get into some more examples of foreign policy and some alliances and organizations that help to connect our international community. Okay. So the whole focus of this module is foreign policy and defense, right? Okay. So what is our role in the world, and what do we spend, and what do those policies look like, when we get into other organizations? Okay, so we'll kind of continue the conversation that you started on Monday in class. Okay, so I thought an interesting thing to see what you guys think. If you had to guess, if you just had to throw out a number, how much do you think the US spends on defense each year? And I'll give you a hint, it's more than you think. So pick a number and then increase it. Put it in the chat for me or unmute. What do you think? 10 million, 50 million. Okay. You guys aren't even close. Put a B in front of it. Put a B in front of it. You guys know what I mean by a B, right? Billion. All right. Nobody's even close yet. JD, you're like think big. Let's hear a few more guesses. All right, we're getting higher, even higher. Not even close.
80 million?
Not even close. I know. People are like, what? All right. So when we say defense, so I do want to say that really quick. When we say defense, it's not just military, right? A big chunk of that is military. I'm going to show you here in just a second. So a huge chunk of that, probably 80% is military. Okay. So, the different branches of the service, weapons, things like that. But also included in that is like cybersecurity, TSA, when we go to the airports, Department of Defense, negotiating ambassadors, embassies. So there is some of this that is peacekeeping, that is trying to kind of maintain the status quo, negotiating. So it's not all military. So defense is kind of the big umbrella, which, don't get me wrong, huge percentage of that is the military. But there are other agencies that are involved in that. All right, are we ready? Here's the number. This was 2021. So 2021, this was just military. Our overall spending was closer to $1 trillion. We make almost half of the world's spending on defense. Okay. So the USA in 2021 was $801 billion. So I think the highest guess I saw was 50 billion. So you can see, not even close, right? Not even close. Now, to show you how much we spend compared to other countries, look at this, okay? If you add up the next 9 countries spending, China is a second to us, but they don't even spend half of what we do. If you add up China, India, UK, United Kingdom, Russia, France, Germany, Saudi Arabia, Japan, and South Korea, that doesn't even equate to what we spend. So there's our spending, and then you take the next 9 highest spenders, they don't even equal our spending. And then you have the rest of the world that makes up about a little over $500 million. Isn't that crazy? Pick a Google emoji, put it across the screen. Anybody? This doesn't shock anyone, or do we have any reaction? It's a lot. It's so much. Okay, so there's a lot of feelings about this. Why do we spend so much? So if you look at our history prior to World War II, we actually did not spend much on military. World War I, World War II, we were not prepared for war. We were very much a defensive nation. The emoji goes like this. That's so cute. So we were a defensive nation. In fact, when we got sucked into World War II, we weren't ready. It took us almost a year to build weapons and get an army together. That's why they had to do a draft and things like that, because we weren't ready. So since World War II, after World War I, World War II, which we were very much of a defensive nation, you know what I mean? We were kind of like, that's European problems. We're isolated. We're not, we'll worry about that later. Okay. We didn't spend a lot on military. We weren't ready to go to war. And after the experience of World War I, World War II, we went straight into the Cold War. Our shift changed, okay? And we went from being more of a defensive nation to an offensive nation, okay? Reflective in our spending, that we're going to have a presence all over the globe, that we are going to try to intimidate countries, let's say like China or Russia, who we often have conflict with and we don't agree, that by being so militarily ready, we intimidate and we avoid war by saying, don't pick a battle with me. See these guns? So to speak, if you get my figurative point. Okay. So we prevent war is kind of our strategy by having such a military presence and being intimidating to other nations. Like, don't even think about, coming after us. So it is a lot. This is a hot topic. Should we be spending this much? So it's always a big topic of conversation. It is, in fact, though, one of the topics that Democrats and Republicans don't tend to agree on really anything, but they do tend to negotiate and find common ground in defense spending. So sometimes people think this is just a Republican thing. No, Democrats also vote for defense spending. So this is kind of a mutual, some differences, but mutual overarching decision that the United States is going to be more of an offensive nation, not a defensive nation. Now, this also includes, though, aid to other countries. So for example, right now we're aiding Ukraine. We aid South Korea. We aid so many countries in their military efforts. So it's not just our own defense, it's also aiding other countries in their defense who align with us. Okay. So the key question that you got in your notebook was, what is the United States presence on the global stage? Okay. And so kind of got into that, and we'll get into that more today. As you can see by our military spending, we have more international presence than any other nation. Okay. Because that includes our foreign military bases and embassies. Okay. And the key vocab words: dignitary, foreign affairs, right of legislation, embassy, and ambassador. Okay. So we're going to jump over into the notebook and course arc, and I'll give a chance to kind of review these, make sure that you got these. Okay. So if you have your course arc open, remember you get to this through the modules tab. All right. I did just want to really quickly bring your attention while you're getting those open, get your course arc notebook open because we're going to start them. Progress grades are out this week. Okay. I posted them yesterday. I did all the grading that was turned in up until 8.2, transferred it to Infinite Campus, and then posted those grades. So the grades are posted and stuff. Now, if the grade is different now, if you've turned anything in, anything after, I think I posted them around lunchtime on Tuesday yesterday. If you've turned anything in since then, obviously your grade is going to adjust. So progress grades are kind of frozen in time, right? But always remember to check Canvas for your most up-to-date grade, okay? Don't trust Infinite Campus. Please check Canvas. That's where I check when I send out the grade reports, things like that. So if you're ever wondering what's my grade or is this, please do not rely on Infinite Campus. Make sure that you're going into Canvas and that you're checking there, okay? All right, let's jump over into the course arc, all right? And just make sure that we're all on the same page. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you have the course arc and the notebook open. So you're ready to go. Awesome. Yay. Okay. So let's get started. All right. So the key essential question you were supposed to look at is, what is the United States presence on the global stage? Okay. So what does their presence look like on the global stage? And then, and again, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. All right. So that goes in number 1 of the notebook, right? Okay. And let's just review the vocab words really quick. Did you guys get these down, or do you need me to copy and paste them? Did you guys get the vocab down, or do you guys need me to copy and paste it? Let's hear from a few more people. So Maria, want it done? Anybody else? Copy and paste? Okay, so we'd like me to do it? Okay, I'll do it really quick, okay, just because I'm trying to save time. So let's do the matching really quick, and then I'll copy and paste over. It is customary for the president to meet foreign dignitaries or their chief diplomats to, negotiate with other countries. Okay, presidents have the right to have say in their own right of legislate. Oh no, I think that one's foreign affairs. Foreign affairs that are carried out. Yep. Okay, foreign affairs. The president has the blank right to send and receive diplomatic representatives. Okay. The United States has established a blank in each country, so we have an embassy in each country. Okay, and then we appoint ambassadors who go and work in those embassies. So we have embassies in any country that we're on good terms with or we trade with. We have military alliances with. Stuff. Good morning, Miss Carter. And stuff. And okay, so make sure you have those matched. Check the whole answer. So we have embassies all over the world in many, many different countries. In fact, on the PowerPoint, here's a picture of our embassy in Beijing. Okay, in China. And so this is where, if you're a US citizen, if you're ever traveling in that country, you can get help, aid, and it's also considered sovereign ground. So if you ever get into trouble in that country, head to the embassy, all right? Because that's where you'll get help being a US citizen if you're in a foreign country. All right. So let me copy and paste these over for you really quick. So you're gonna have to do this quickly because this is review. So I need to do this quickly so that we can get to today's actual lesson. I do have quite a bit I want to do with you today. Okay, so that's dignitary. Presidents have the right to be involved in their foreign affairs. So every president's going to have a little different approach to foreign affairs. Maybe who we trade with, how we approach something. So for example, President Trump actually played pretty hardball with China. So our trade relationships with them kind of got more tense. President Biden has taken a little bit more of a softer approach with that and stuff. So things have eased a little bit. So sometimes depending on the person in charge, maybe certain countries, President Trump, had more friendly relations with Russia. Under President Biden, those relations have not been as friendly. So again, sometimes depending on who that leader is, it can improve or change our relations with another country. And it's not pointing right or wrong. It's just like their approach and their view of how that nation is interacting with us, or what they're doing on an international scale. Okay. Everyone has the right to legislation, receive diplomats. Okay, we have embassies in other countries. And again, that's where if you're ever visiting another country and you run into any issues or things like that, head to the embassy. Okay, you're safe there, and that's where you can get help, and stuff. So those are important not only for diplomacy, but also for people that travel. An ambassador. So every president, when they are elected, one of their jobs is not just selecting their cabinet; it's also selecting ambassadors to represent them in different countries and stuff. So this can be a really interesting job. You get to go to that country, and the ambassadors kind of take care of day-to-day communication. I would call it the good communication. Now, when things get dicey, that's when the Secretary of State has to step in. All right. So if communications are good, ambassador works. But if we kind of have to, have a coming to and serious conversation or true negotiations or trying to avoid war, then that's when the Secretary of State, who oversees the Department of Defense, gets called in. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Like I said, I was going to do that really fast. All right, so do that as quickly as you can. All right. You guys looked at some of the history of the Department of Defense, which really started very, very small. The first person to hold the position of Secretary of State, which oversees defense, so oversees the military, oversees diplomacy, oversees embassies, and negotiations, and works hand in hand with the president. Okay. The first of that was Thomas Jefferson. Example, the first woman Secretary of State was in the 90s until 2001, Miss Albright. First example of Black Secretary of State was Colin Powell under President Bush Jr. And here's just an example of some of the last 5 or 6 Secretary of States that we've had. Okay, so years they served and under what president. It's an extremely stressful job. Okay, very, very stressful job, because you are the one getting in there in the nitty gritty when stuff's going down and it's on the edge. You are representing the president. You are speaking on behalf of the president. So sometimes you got to get tough. You can't be everybody's friend and everybody get along. Sometimes you got to draw hard lines. So this is definitely a very stressful, important position in the international community, but for our country's security as well. Okay. Let me look at number 3. So number 3, did you guys get this chart? You're supposed to look at 2 policies the Department of Defense is currently working on. Did we get those 2 from the notebook? You did? Okay. All right. So we're good on that. All right. So I'm going to move on. Awesome. Yeah. Wherever we can save time. All right. You watched the crash course, I know, in the video, and then went over these questions, right? So the United States has maintained a policy of preemptive war. So instead of being defensive, we've been more offensive. That's part of the reason for our amount of spending. Okay. So the ability to strike first of another country. Okay. And through intimidation, hopefully avoid war. And there's definitely some evidence to suggest that that's worked. Some people question, Joe, just at what cost? We spend so much. Where else could that money be used? So it's a debatable stance, but it has produced results. So you can't debate that there's produced results, but sometimes the question is, how much is too much spending? The armed forces are controlled under Department of Defense. Okay. And what are the reasons the United States maintains military bases all around the world? Since World War II, we want to have a global presence. So for example, one of our largest military bases is in South Korea. And we do that to try to make sure that North Korea doesn't invade. That's one of the most oppressive regimes in the world. But also we do this to annoy China, all right, who we're constantly competing and at odds with, right? So we like having presence all over the world. It makes it easier and it makes it more intimidating. Okay. Strong military presence discourages any attacks, and collective security, trying to maintain that global peace. Okay. So hopefully you got this, and then let's go to aid and alliances. Okay. So on this page, it talks about, so number 4, you are supposed to respond to that. So I'm going to skip that one, and we're going to move to number 5 in the notebook. Okay. Select a peacekeeping mission currently under operation and complete the chart. So we'll talk about this here in just a minute. Let's watch this short video on what is the function of the UN, United Nations. So when we look at foreign policy and foreign agencies, the most recognized is definitely going to be the UN, the United Nations, which was formed after World War II. And it was a collection of countries coming together trying to ensure that world peace would continue. So a place to negotiate issues, to track human rights violations, to aid countries that are in crisis, whether it be financial, medical, to help new countries set up democratic societies, to help them avoid military regimes again. All right, so let's watch this quick video of what the UN does, and it's not just about negotiating and how it functions. Okay, so one of the major functions of the UN is a platform for countries to come together with their representatives and talk about issues, but also a really big part is helping war-ridden countries to rebuild, to hopefully not have that in the future, to get rid of landmines, to set up, elections, and hopefully bring some stability to a country that is lacking that. Okay, so let's take a look at number 5. Select a peacekeeping mission, which the link to this is right here, different peacekeeping missions. Okay. And I went ahead and pre-selected one. All right. So an example of one of the missions that falls under the UN. All right. So there's many organizations within the UN. All right. Is United Nations Truth Supervision Organization. All right. So I'll put this in the chat for you. So we're doing number 5 in the notebook. If we go to the tab, it's going to show United Nations and then different organizations. Okay, so it gives different, so we're peacekeeping organizations. So I just went ahead and selected one in the Middle East. Middle East historically is one of the most war-ridden territories in the world. Okay, a lot of that is religious history because it was the crossroads of the world where people could migrate. So more people, more problems. You have religious conflict historically and today, resources. And with the formation of Israel, that definitely intensified it to another level. And stuff. So if we click on the organization, all right, it's going to give us the name, and then we go to the fact sheet, and it tells us all about the organization. Okay, so who's there, how does it work, and kind of the history behind it. All right, so for example, the location of one of these locations is in Jerusalem. Use this and fill out your chart. They began right after World War II, May 1948, with the formation of Israel. So this was formed when Israel was founded because this did cause a lot of conflict because there were a lot of Muslims who were displaced with the formation of Israel and Jews moving back into the region. So you have political conflict, but you also have that religious conflict and stuff, which we see ongoing If you've ever taken world history or U.S. history, discussions of that, it's not likely to just conclude itself. So this organization is a permanent presence when there is conflict, when there is disagreements, which are ongoing. It's sometimes they're just lower, other times they'll spike. To try to negotiate, to help with ceasefires, to help with armistice. So they're on the front lines, and when things are escalating, they are right there trying to, so to speak, break up the fight. And stuff. So what nations are involved in this? Switzerland, Finland, Ireland, Denmark, New Zealand, Sweden, and Canada. So there's about 377 people associated or personnels with this organization. This I thought was really interesting. Casualties, 52. Which is actually a lot for an organization. But when you think about what they do, they're on the front lines intervening when there's conflict. You're going to get caught sometimes in a really bad situation, maybe in the crossfire if a bomb is set off or something like that. So this is by no means an easy job. This is a high-risk job, trying to literally going into ongoing off and on war zones to break up and try to negotiate between entities. And that can be really, really difficult. Okay, so we did number 5. So we're going to go to international organizations in our quest here. So one of the first international organizations that the U.S. planned was the Marshall Plan. Okay, so the Marshall Plan was established after World War II to help countries coming out of war to have financial aid. So coming out, if you're a new nation, there was a lot of decolonization after World War II. So countries breaking off that had been a colony, so ruled by a bigger country, now independent. But when you're a newly independent country, imagine it's like a little baby bird in a field. A hawk could come get you. A fox could come. You're very susceptible to invasion and intrusion and military takeover. So the Marshall Plan was to aid these new nations in their building process and to help oversee. So giving military support, political support. Now they had to promise to be not communist. Okay, so they had to set up democratic society. So we definitely had strings attached. And they had to be an ally of ours, all right? But to help these nations build stability and hopefully not just go into civil war, which it happens to a lot of new nations. They go into civil war over political differences, right? And different entities trying to take over. Another example of an international organization that we're a part of is NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So this was formed after World War II during the Cold War, which was communist versus anti-communist. So any nation that was surrounding the Atlantic that was against communism joined the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Over time, there's over 30 nations that are part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And it's not just, it's about trade, it's about military alliances, it's about negotiation. So think of it as like a mini UN, okay? But these nations are all aligning in their beliefs and practices. In fact, part of what caused the war in Ukraine was Ukraine wanting to join NATO and Russia not wanting them to join and basically threatening them and saying, don't you dare. Ukraine's like, we're an independent nation. Now they're a newer nation, so it makes them susceptible. They try to join, Russia threatens them, Russia invades. Okay, now there are other reasons for the invasion as well, but actually the NATO aspect was a big part of that. Okay, we're going to watch this video. As we watch this video, I will copy and paste over information for number 6. Okay, so please get this done while we watch this video because it's about 11 minutes. So it's asking you, NATO is an organization of 30 members. Lists 3 of their members and when they joined, not the US or the UK. So I'll give you kind of the original countries that joined in the years. After the Soviet Union fell apart, these new nations that then have joined, most of them in Eastern Europe. And then one of the most recent people or countries that have joined is Northern Macedonia. Okay, so I'll copy and paste those over. All right, as we watch the video. Here we go.
Go back to our channel. There are several international organizations that the United States government and individual Americans participate in that you will need to know for your exam. And these include the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, NAFTA, and NATO that we talked about before. But before we jump into those, a reminder to teachers that this PowerPoint lesson plans, activities, and worksheets are all available at Teachers Pay Teachers. Just search for Mr. Raymond Civics EOC Academy. So let's start with our first one. You're probably familiar with the United Nations. This is an organization made up of close to 200 countries from around the world. The UN, with its headquarters in New York City, was designed to be a place where countries could come to discuss their issues without resorting to violence and war, which has plagued our planet for far too long. Mainly Maintaining peace and building friendships is the #1 goal of the UN, as well as providing a forum where countries could gather to discuss global issues. The General Assembly is the gathering of all of these countries. This is the giant room where speeches are given and they can vote on issues. The UN also has what is known as the Security Council. This group of countries decides what to do when 2 or more countries are waging war or are on the verge of fighting. There are 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, and these are the big guys: the United States, Britain, Russia, China, and France. Now, in addition to the 5 members, 10 additional countries join the permanent members for 2-year terms, making a total of 15 countries on the Security Council, deciding what to do about fights. The Security Council will try to broker ceasefires between 2 sides. They can pass sanctions, which, as you know from our last video, is when you block trade with another country as a punishment. They can send troops or observers, and if worse comes to worse, they can use military force. Now, here is a map of where UN peacekeepers have been sent in the past, a lot in Africa and Asia and the Middle East. The big 5 permanent members have a veto power, which means that one member can stop the entire council from taking action against a country. And this has come up recently during the Syrian civil war, in which Russia and China, who are allies with Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad, have been able to stop the other members from stepping in to deal with the Syrian leader, who is accused of using biological weapons against his own people. However, the UN is not all about fights. The United Nations has a program called UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Emergency Fund. UNICEF's goal is to help children around the world. They collect funds to distribute emergency relief from famine and poverty and disease. UNICEF also provides education programs in areas where there are no schools. Now, I remember as a kid during Halloween when kids would carry around boxes to collect change for UNICEF. I probably should have joined them. So while UNICEF is part of the United Nations, they operate semi-independently and rely on fundraising. So when you think of UNICEF, think of it as a great UN program to help kids around the world. The UN also has the International Court of Justice, usually just referred to as the World Court. It's located in the Netherlands in a town called The Hague. And here is where countries can settle disputes in a court of law, as well as a place where war criminals and rulers who have done terrible things to their people can be tried for their crimes. The problem is sometimes getting these bad guys all the way to Europe to face trial, as there's not really a police force to go out and get them. As more and more countries interact with one another, people are looking for the International Court of Justice to play a bigger role in the future of our global world. A lot of people, however, criticize the United Nations as being weak and unable to stop wars. And for that reason, our next group continues to play a big role in foreign conflicts: NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This is a defensive treaty, or really a military alliance, between the United States, Canada, and 25 European countries. We covered NATO in our last video. This treaty and international organization is based on the idea of collective security. The countries in this organization basically agree to combine their militaries and announce to the world that if a country messes with one of its members, the other countries will come to their defense. Now, NATO was created after World War II, at the beginning of the Cold War, mostly between the United States and their Western European allies, and their new enemy, Communist Russia, now the Soviet Union. We'll look at the Cold War in our next video, in which you can see on this map, a line was drawn through Europe with NATO on one side, and the Soviet Union with the countries they controlled in Eastern Europe on the other side. While the two sides never directly fought one another, the world lived in fear of NATO and the Soviet Union going to war. And when I say NATO, I mostly mean the United States. With the collapse of the Soviet Union around 1990, former Soviet states like Poland and Croatia have joined NATO, making present-day Russia feel more threatened by NATO. NATO has sent troops and undertaken military operations in Afghanistan, Kosovo, Iraq, and Africa. Of course, the United States, with by far the most advanced military in the world, makes up the bulk of NATO forces and operations. And a lot of these wars or conflicts are considered to be strictly US wars, but as you can see with this German troop in Iraq, these are actually NATO operations. Our next group, the Red Cross, is an international organization that developed out of war. You've probably seen the Red Cross in your neighborhood, or if your town has dealt with a flood or a hurricane. Very often they have blood drives to use during times of emergencies, but the Red Cross is an international organization. The Red Cross and Red Crescent, if located in a Muslim country, is an example of an NGO or a non-governmental organization. And that's a phrase you need to know for your exam. An NGO means that this group is not tied to any country. This allows it to operate freely throughout the world. They provide a lot of emergency relief, such as food, water, and medical supplies for those whose homes or towns have been destroyed by a disaster or by war. They also monitor the treatment of prisoner of wars and go to conflicts to make sure that no war crimes are taking place. In fact, as I said, the Red Cross began as an organization to help those who were wounded during wars. The big Red Cross was a sign that these were not soldiers and shouldn't be shot at. Part of why it's important for the Red Cross to be an NGO is that they remain neutral and help wounded from both sides of a war. And since they are neutral, governments are more likely to let them come into their countries to help. While the headquarters of the International Red Cross is in Geneva, Switzerland, there are branches of the Red Cross in countries throughout the world. In addition to the Red Cross, there are many NGOs dedicated to helping people around the world. There is Doctors Without Borders providing free emergency health care in disaster areas, Oxfam fighting famine and disease, Amnesty International, who speak out for human rights and political prisoners, and Save the Children, helping kids get healthcare and education. Our next group is an economic association. The WTO, or World Trade Organization, is made up of 162 countries around the world and was created with the goal of increasing free trade. Free trade means that countries will buy and sell goods from one another without placing taxes on imports. And this brings up a word that you need to know. Tariffs are taxes on imports. Tariffs were used by countries for a long time to protect businesses and companies inside their country. This diagram shows how a tax on British cloth would protect American cloth makers by making the British product more expensive. And this is known as protectionism. Protectionism was practiced by the United States and countries around the world for a long time, but it seems to be a thing of the past. Today, we use the word globalization to describe how countries from all over the world trade with one another, and that is what the WTO is all about. The WTO is not without criticism. In fact, a protest in Seattle at a 1999 WTO conference led to a major riot. As some say, the WTO is more about helping large companies and corporations than it is about helping people. America has a similar agreement, which we covered last time, called NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement. This is an economic treaty between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, in which the three countries trade freely without taxing each other. And here's that word tariff again, which is a tax on imports. NAFTA is not without critics either. Here are some American auto workers protesting NAFTA as several car companies have moved factories to Mexico in search of cheaper labor. NAFTA, like the World Trade Organization, represents the challenge in America of keeping manufacturing jobs here versus our desire for cheap products. So keep in mind for international organizations, the ones that you need to know. The US are either members like they are in the UN, the WTO, NAFTA, and NATO, or they are impacted and participating groups such as NGOs like the Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders. And that's our brief look at international organizations. Up next is
Okay, so I like them. They do a good job of going over, what are some of these key organizations? Sorry, I didn't really turn my camera off. It's of some of these key organizations that a lot of which we're involved in, the UN, NATO, definitely some of the bigger organizations that we're involved in. And we actually see those playing out today, the war in Ukraine. At the heart of it, there is the debate between Ukraine being a sovereign, independent nation wanting to join NATO. They tried several years ago. We said there's strict criteria to join. They weren't quite meeting the criteria. So they went back to make some of those changes within their government and spending. In the meantime, Russia, which borders Ukraine, said, you better not. And Ukraine's like, we're independent. We could do what we want. And they tried to bully Ukraine into not doing it. So this was one of the several issues that Russia used to justify going into. Well, they're still not a part of NATO. They're still not a part of NATO, but they wouldn't promise Russia that they wouldn't try to be a part of NATO. So Russia was trying to intimidate them into not joining this. Yes, they tried and are continuing to try and stuff. And so, yeah, because it's a lengthy process. It's not just a simple thing to get into NATO and stuff. All right. So let's take a look at the questions. What agreement initiated the provisions for financial aid from the United States to the Allies after World War II? So that was the Marshall Plan. So after World War II ended, United States, one of our first foreign acts was to try to help countries rebuild and avoid extremism and avoid war again, avoid military dictatorships. So Marshall Plan was giving aid to these countries militarily, politically. The fear of financial destruction across Europe brought the rise of communism to vulnerable countries in Europe. So this was our counteraction to that. NATO and the Marshall Plan were counteracting, trying to stop the spread of communism. Okay, so we'll submit those. All right, so once you have those done, then we're going to go to the Google Tours and we will do the matching. Okay, so we did number 6. I put those in the chat for you. Okay. So look at organizations that have joined NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So the originals, here it gives the originals beside the US and UK. All right. They were part of this, but they were the founders of it. And then later, after the USSR fell and the Cold War ended, you see a lot of Eastern European nations joining. So Ukraine has tried, Ukraine just has not entered this list yet, but a lot of Eastern European nations have joined. Okay. And then most recently, North Macedonia in 2020. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some of the matching. All right. And then what you'll need to do then is still your Google Tours. Okay. Which definitely is a part of this matching. So founded to keep peace, relations, and develop relationships around the world. That is the United Nations. And push save. Formed to protect members around the Atlantic Ocean, North America, and Europe. That is NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Partnership between Europeans or European countries to avoid conflict is the European Union. So think of European Union as like its own little mini United Nations. So coming together again, both world wars, World War I and World War II, started in Europe. So there's definitely a lot of diversity and conflict between nations. So trying to avoid that from erupting into a world war, which domino effects around the world. Branch of the UN focused on healthcare. That's World Health Organization. And then created to help provide money to poor and impoverished countries is the World Bank. Okay, so this concludes all the things as far as the matching and multiple choice that you have to do in your course arc. So if you've been following along with me, you should have your course arc done. All right, so course arc is done. Now what you need to do though is you use a little bit of what's left in the course arc to complete your notebook. Okay, so what you'll do on your own is you will work on number 7, going to that link, and you will talk about different organizations, United Nations, NATO, European Union, World Health Organization, and the World Bank, and summarize when they were founded, what's their purpose, okay, give a description. And then you have the journal that you need to answer. 1 paragraph is fine. Okay, ranking in highest priority to lowest priority, all right, these different things. And then involving our security and our involvement in defense spending. And then finally, respond in 1 paragraph. What is the United States' presence in the global stage? And that you can summarize with examples, okay? If you go back in the chat, I put that up, like the 1021 part. 1021, if you go back up in the chat, it's up there. I copied and pasted it in for the chart, I believe, right? Yep, this chart. It's in the chat. Okay, so if you go back to like 1021, it's in there. All right. Okay, before we go, so we reviewed really quick 1 through 4, looked at the vocab, the main prompt. We looked more at defense spending, foreign policy, looked at examples of peacekeeping missions within the United Nations. That's what the chart was for. International organizations like the Marshall Plan and NATO and stuff. So we reviewed the matching, so different international organizations and their purpose. We watched the video. Okay. Now, this is not all due till Friday. Tomorrow, we are going to start your Module 8 project, which is due on Tuesday. Okay, so I wanted to kind of get ahead on this so that we have more time to work on the project because the projects are worth so many points in the summative category. Okay, before you take your quiz, I have a review sheet for you. Okay, and I strongly recommend use this to help you review. And also, you're allowed to use notes on your quiz. So print this off and use this. Remember, it just has to be hard copy. Okay, it has to be hard copy. It can't be on your computer and stuff. So when looking at this, it gives you your definitions. It gives you some of the key points. Okay, so like what is our history? It looks at the history of our Secretary of State, which is our lead kind of negotiator on the global stage. It takes you through all the multiple choice questions, okay, that are found in there. Some notes on NATO and the United Nations, and then that matching that we just did. Okay, remember they like to pull a lot of those questions from the course arc and put those on the quiz. So it's a really good idea to have those. Okay, so this is to help you out. So tomorrow we are going to start Module 8 project, is the U.S. ready to be a cash-free society? So we'll review the instructions, the rubrics, and we'll start on the task sheet. And then we'll continue it on Monday because then it is due on Tuesday. All right. So technically, Module 8, Lesson 2 is due Friday. Notebook, course arc, quiz. The course arc should be done. The notebook, you only have 3 things left. Don't skip those. Those are worth a lot of points. So if you skip those, you'll get a bad grade on your notebook. Okay. And then use that review sheet to help you on your quiz. Okay. And then we'll start the project tomorrow. All right. That's it for today. So if you don't have any questions, you're free to go. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow. If you have any questions, you can stay behind. I can help you out. But we'll pick up here tomorrow and we'll start working on the project. All right. I hope you have a wonderful day. And yes, thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.